we're shifting gears, and every kind of January, it's sort of this time for a new start in some ways, right? Now, I kind of feel like we get two new starts. The beginning of the school year feels like a new start, right? Because that's our fiscal year, if you will. But then there's something about January that really feels like a new start. And, a lot of people, do you make New Year's resolutions? Anyone? Couple? No? Like one or two that are brave enough? Once a few people shake their heads no, the people who are like, they're like, yeah, I do. I've tried to. I don't really do them much. But it is really kind of a time to get some resolve into the way you've been trying to live, And I think, so we try to do something sort of around spiritual disciplines and things we can do to grow in our faith every year. And so this week, or this year, we're going to talk about prayer, which is one of those things that we all really should know about. We should do. It's something we talk about, but often it's harder to live out. It's so, G.K. Chesterton wrote this: Christianity has not so much been tried and found wanting as it has been found difficult and left untried. Because there's things that we know we should do within the faith, and there could be a whole gamut of things we could talk about, of things that we know are beneficial, ways to live, and I think especially you read the Sermon on the Mount, and we occasionally talk about that. But it's like, the Sermon on the Mount has some pretty hard things about the way you should live, the way of Jesus being very different than sometimes the way we live. And a lot of times it's like, it's not that I don't want to live that way, but I don't want to live that way. And we don't try it. We don't live that way. And so I think there's aspects and essentials of the faith that are often cut out or left out in the way we live. And one of the things that is often found difficult and then untried or unpracticed is prayer. It's easy to skip prayer. Many things fight us for our time every day. Anyone have kids? You try to get up and pray early, and they always get up about the time you do, or maybe a few minutes before, and they wake you up. Or you're trying to pray when they go to bed, but they just, they're like boomerangs. You keep putting them to bed, they come back. Putting them to bed, they come back. Maybe your spouse, work, sleep. There's a lot of things. Most of you know, I love dogs. I'm a dog person. I know that we have some cat people too. We all get along in this church. But no, I love animals. I saw this cute little tiny miniature horse on Facebook this week. I'm like, I need a miniature horse. I don't know where I'm going to keep it. Maybe just, in the house. I don't know. Where do you keep miniature horses? Some of you were like, if you saw the picture, you'd want one too. But, I love dogs. And so, it was funny because this morning, now I'm not saying this because I'm so holy, but Denise and I have been getting up and we pray for you. We pray for you because y'all need it. No, but we get up and we pray for the church on Sunday mornings and everything together. And, there's always something to kind of keep you from it because it's like you're tired. You maybe just don't feel like it. You're like, I need espresso, not, And this morning it was so funny. We're sitting there, we're trying to pray, and my dog, I don't know what she was doing. She's like spinning in the chair. She's making all this noise and everything. And I'm like, dogs are good. They're creatures created by God. I think I love my dog. But at that moment, even something good like a dog is a distraction, right? It was easy to get off focus. And there's a lot of things in our lives that are not necessarily bad. There are bad things that are distractions. There's things that we need to get rid of that are distractions. Trust me, I know that. But even like the good things that can distract us from prayer. And so often it's something, you can even start to feel like a failure when we talk about prayer because a lot of us know I should pray, but I rarely find somebody who's like, oh yeah, I probably pray too much. I spend way too much time with God. Even Billy Graham, they asked him, at the end of his ministry what he would do differently. He's like, I'd pray more. And I'm like, man, he seemed like he's the kind of guy who prayed a lot. And, you're feeling like a little awkward. And, a lot of times we can actually feel like a little bit like a failure. But John 10:10, Jesus said, the thief comes to steal and kill and destroy, but I come that they may have life and have it to the full. And if you want the full life that God promises, the full life that God intends, it begins with a life of prayer. And so Matthew 11:28 says, starting at verse 28, says this. Then Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light." Now, most of us don't yoke things. Sometimes I will make yokes. Or, you might scramble some yokes. Different kind of yoke. Back in the yoke was something that kind of would hook two horses together or two oxen together or something. And that it was what kept them on focus and task to be productive. And so it connects oxen as they plow in the right direction. It teaches. So what it becomes this word to describe a teaching. It's a way of living. And so Jesus does have a way of living, and I think that's sometimes something we mess up in our desire to not be legalistic about faith, and our desire to go, it's not about rules, it's about relationship, and it's not. We've kind of taken away some of these are the practices of faith in the way that Jesus would have us live, and so there's this way of living, and there's still a yoke. It's just a more gentle one, easier. It's still a way to live. But there's plenty of grace for when we stumble, but there is this way of living, this way of life that's a better way of life. 1 John 5:3 says this: loving God means keeping his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. I think sometimes if you try to just follow all the rules, if you don't understand grace, if you just try to follow the rules, you talk to somebody about, they're like, I'm a good person, I'm going to get to heaven. When you're really aware of all the ways that we mess up when we try to follow all the rules, you get PTSD just trying to be good because it's too much pressure. And Jesus gives us the Holy Spirit to come inside of us that changes us when you come to faith, and it'll change the way you want, it'll change your desires. And in many churches in the U.S., we present Jesus like this great big get out of hell free card. And I picture the get out of jail free card from Monopoly. Anyone? It's we just get out of hell free. Here you go. Here's Jesus. And that there is some truth to that, in that I escape judgment when I have faith and I put my faith in Christ, and he gives me new life that we talked about, I think last week or the week before, that we're born again then. So there is, there's that. But it's not just something that you do so that your future is secured up here. It is, again, this way of life, this way of living, if you're going to live the Jesus way. And it's about much more. Knowing Jesus has made my life vastly different. I think about it sometimes. I definitely have a different career choice. I'm pretty sure pastor was not on my list of things, of ways, things I want to do. Most of you know I want to be a chemist. So my chemistry degree is so helpful in ministry all the time. When we debate whether we're to spread sodium chloride or calcium chloride, I can talk about the differences of either and the type of bonds, and no one listens to me at all. Anyway, it's definitely career choice. And honestly, I look at marriage is hard. I don't think we would have made it without Jesus, because I know me too well. And I'm a little stubborn at times, and I've got some problems. I know I look perfect at all. I always say, I don't have to be the perfect husband. I just have to look better than the other ones. Anyway, I probably would have parented very differently, and not in a positive way, because Jesus changed me. I'd be someone different. So his yoke can be hard at times because it goes against the way we might want to live, but it's easier. It's this better way of living. It's this better way of life. Still a yoke, a teaching, a way of life to be emulated. And we'll truly find rest in our hearts when we find that place in him. We often emulate those we admire. You may not even realize it. When you're little, you can kind of see people, and we wear, when you saw the kids go to kids' church, they wear jerseys of the people they admire, or you watch them play touch football or something, and they'll act like whoever the current celebrity is, and it's kind of cute, but we tend to model what we admire, and then we even sometimes we don't realize it, but we're influenced and shaped by what celebrities wear. There's certain sneakers. My son is a sneakerhead, and so some of you are like, what is that? It's people who like sneakers and stuff. And so, there's different ones that are cool at different times. And he talks to me about all these models of things I don't really understand. I wear black Vans today, and I had those shoes for. I'm very simple. He's more complex. But we're shaped by what we wear, and fashion trends, and often from other people. And here's the thing: we emulate a lot of other people in life. We really must emulate Jesus if we want that full life that he promises. And so we're going to turn to how we see Jesus in prayer in Mark chapter 1. Now, we're going to start way down in verse 35 if you're following along in a Bible that has pages instead of following it up on the screen. We still have a few people with pages. That's great. It's funny. I've gone digital because it's just easier to carry, and the music stand's not that big, and it's like shuffling Bibles. And but anyway, Mark chapter 1, verse 35 says, before daybreak the next morning, Jesus got up and went out to an isolated place to pray. So before daybreak, so early in the morning. Now, for some of you, you're like, oh my gosh, I do not like early. Who's a morning person? Who's an evening person? Who's neither, and they just have to get up at some point? There's some of us, I wake up at 3 o'clock a lot of times. I'm like ready to start the day. I'm like, I need to make myself go back to sleep. Some of you are like, that's horrible. If I wake up at 3 o'clock, it's only to use the restroom. But I like to get early. But here's the thing. Even if you may not want to get up early, if there was something important to you, you'd get up, right? Like you'd get up for some of us Black Friday shopping when we used to go out of the house to shop. Remember that? When people would leave the house? Now it's all click, click, click. Some of you are like, no. Or, to go hunting, let the dog out, whatever your thing is. To go play a sport or go to a Steelers game. Okay, just a couple of us. They're not having a good season. But we get up. And so he gets up. And, the picture I always get, this is where I picture slumber party Jesus. Because, it would be a small house. And, you're like when you're at a slumber party and there's people sleeping everywhere. It's kind of how I picture the scene. And he would have gotten up and he kind of tiptoes off with sweatpants and a hoodie. And I know it wouldn't have been sweatpants and a hoodie, but that's how I picture him. And he goes to an isolated place to pray. Now, I don't know where that was in a small town. I always picture, and Josh and I, this reminded me of it again this week, because we were out thrift shopping. We like thrift shopping, and we're looking at different things. I'm always looking at books. He's looking at DVDs because he likes old things. And he's like, look, Dad, they have Nacho Libre. And it's a stupid movie, but it's funny. And there's this one scene I love, like he goes off to be alone and everything, and he's like, then like later he's like, you find out he's like 200 meters from like the village because it's a small town. Where else are you gonna go? That's kind of how I picture Jesus, not like Nacho Libre, but somehow he finds this way to go out and kind of get away from people, which can be hard because our houses are bigger, and I still struggle sometimes to get alone, right? Of course, my kids are older now. It's a little easier because they just leave me alone. Then you get older and you're like, bother me, come to me. Anyway, later, Simon and the others went to find Jesus. And when they found him, they said, everyone's looking for you. And, it was really, you kind of wonder how long he was gone that everyone's looking for him. If he slipped in, slipped out real quick, they probably wouldn't be looking for him. They wouldn't even know he left. But he's been gone, he's praying, and, you kind of picture, Peter, I kind of picture, they've just started following Jesus in chapter 1, if you read Mark. And they're like, hey, this is great. We got people waiting for you. We got things planned out, right? Like, we got this down, Jesus. We know what we're going to do. He's like, your platform is going to be huge. Like, you're going to be big, Jesus. We booked you to speak at the biggest synagogues. We got things growing. The marketing team has some great ideas for things we can do to push this thing you're doing, Jesus. And really, why are they looking for him? Because in Mark 1, if you were to read the rest of the chapter up to this point, Jesus is casting out demons. He's healing people. And when you start doing that draws a big crowd, right? Like people are like, hey, I want to check this thing out. And so Jesus is drawing this crowd. But Jesus replies, and again, I'm picturing what Simon was thinking. But we must go to other towns as well, and I will preach there. That's why I've come. So he traveled throughout the region of Galilee, preaching in the synagogues and casting out demons. preach. That's why I've come. And so, he didn't come to be a celebrity preacher or healer. Jesus came, to reveal the Father to us. We understand who God is by looking at who Jesus is. We had some ideas about him, but we really got to see, when you go, what is God like? Look at Jesus' life. And he's someone we can emulate. And then he gives himself as a sacrifice for our sin. That's what we're going to talk about at Easter. Spoiler alert. But Jesus comes and he gives his life for us. But then he gives us this, as believers, this example to follow. And so we may emulate a lot of other people. We may emulate celebrities. We may emulate people who might even be worthy of emulation in some ways. But really, he gives us this example to follow. The healings and deliverance were only signs of his compassion for the weak, the sick, and the outcast, not a means to gather large crowds. It was an outgrowth of his compassion. And so Jesus stays focused. He stayed in prayer with the Father. And so we see that model. Jesus is always turning to prayer. And when you think about it, he was God in the flesh. Why did he have to pray? But that's part of this fellowship with God. This keeps him focused. And Christianity, I often liken it to, and I go immediately to sports analogies, so I know some of us are more band-oriented, musical. I always think of a football team. Everyone's got a job. It's like, most of us, when we think of, now, Saquon, like with that jump and thing, that we think of that, like, all props. That dude was awesome. But here's the thing. If there's no blocks going on, he's not going anywhere, right? And so everyone on a football team has a job. And all of us have a job to do in faith, in Christianity. There's something for us to do. And I think of bands. You have, most people, even when you think of the worship team, you think of the people up there. But there's somebody who had to plan and practice, like the thing, and they had to practice, and they've got different instruments that are up there at different times. And there's a sound guy in the back who everyone forgets about until something goes wrong. And then we all think of the sound guy. But there's all these, Christianity is like we're all on a team and we have a job. And God's uniquely gifted and placed you to somewhere to serve. Whether it's like you're giving a ride to someone, you're teaching kids or playing music or, paint and maintenance and clean. Everyone's job is important. And everyone's function is important. I read a recent article, and I won't mention the car company because I don't want them to find me and sue me or something. But maybe you've seen it. This car company recalled 23,000 cars after discovery that one single worker may have forgotten to bolt down seats. If you don't think your job is important, that guy or girl, I don't know, it's equal opportunity in a factory. One dude, I'm going to say it's a dude because I don't want to be misogynistic there, but one dude doesn't do his job, 23,000 cars got to come back, right? Now, and so sometimes I think we think of our job and our function may not seem important, but all of us have functions that are important. You don't think about that bolt into the seat until you get in an accident and the back seat ends up in the front seat, right? It's important. And, and here's the thing. God will prepare you for bigger things, and so we start with small things. We're faithful in what we do. I remember I led the worst Bible study ever, I think. When we were at the Easter members, we were at the University of Pittsburgh, and I was like leading a Bible study. I didn't know what I was doing. I love Jesus. I love the Bible, and we were figuring out what to do. And a little more direction and help could have been useful, but I didn't have anyone giving me direction and help, so I just went forward and did it. Not the best Bible study ever. I hope, people got unsaved in it. It was terrible. No, no, I'm kidding. No, it was, we did our best, but then, when you're faithful, then God will bring other things to you. Eventually, I worked at churches, I pastor, I get to teach all over the world, fun stuff. But when you're faithful, God will bring you other things. And, even at work and how we live in our marriages and, you constantly serve because this is the way God has created us. God's created us in positions to serve. But here's the thing, serving must come out of a relationship with God. And a lot of us, we're good at the doing, but not the being. And we can be good at doing our job and our function. Again, it's important. We need everyone to serve. But that has to come out of your relationship with God. Jesus was doing, but he was still being with God. It's easy in the Christian faith to kind of make it about check boxes. Like, I did this, I did that. I serve on this team, I serve on that team. Those are all good things. But it has to be out of your relationship with God. Or honestly, you'll start to resent your service. Because if it's not something that God's birthing in you to do, it'll become a burden to you. But serving comes out of this relationship with God. Prayer is what Jesus did habitually. Prayer must be something we do habitually. It's a habit we create. We're reading all kinds of quotes today. Augustine's Confessions. He said this. He said, you have made, this is like a translation, so it may not sound quite like you've heard it before. You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it finds its rest in you. It's our faith in God, our relationship with him, that will truly give us rest in our soul. We tend to seek to kind of fill it with all kinds of things. I like to eat. I don't know if you know that, but you open the fridge and you can never quite find what you want. Everyone ever do that? And then you open it later and it's like to see if something else appeared, or your standards have lowered a little bit. But in the end, you ever just and I've tried. I like to eat healthy. I do eat pretty healthy most of the week, but holidays not so much. But it's like you try to. But I remember like low-fat ice cream that came out at some point. But the problem with low-fat ice cream was for me, I would eat the whole half gallon because it would never quite satisfy me. I learned at some point if I just eat the good stuff and eat a smaller quantity, I feel satisfied because the right stuff satisfies you. And we try to satisfy our lives with so many other things, but you need the real thing, the good thing. And that's what prayer is. You can feel dissatisfied with the rest of your life if you're not in fellowship with God, because he's made us for this relationship. He's made us for this connection, and it gets squeezed out if we're not careful. And then we don't find true satisfaction. I said it earlier, I believe. Many say, relationship, not religion, when we talk about faith. And all aboard on that. Woo, woo. We're on that train. But here's the thing. We'll say that, not you guys, other people, but never spend any time developing that relationship. It may not be about rules, but there is a rule of way of life, and it's about relationship, but we need to invest in that relationship. If you're married, imagine never spending time with your spouse. What kind of relationship you got? Not much of one. It's probably going to end. If you're not married, friends. What kind of relationship do you have if you never spend time with your friends? Not much of one. And so that relationship satisfies us like nothing else can. We often find it in silence, going away from the crowd to pray, like Jesus did. There's an article a few years ago, and it was in Fast Company. I used to read Fast Company a lot, just a magazine. And Questlove, musical artist, producer, and actor, says this. He says, the key component for creativity, which I don't really think many people get nowadays, is silence. That's really, really important, to be in a secluded, quiet place where you can hear your thoughts. When we get bored, we pull out our phones and get instant gratifications. It's still very true. I embrace the idea of being bored and just sitting around. That's when the best ideas come to you. It's hard to find silence and time for God. It's so easy. I use my phone for an alarm clock, like many of us do. It's like, so you pick it up in the morning, and then you see all those notifications because people have called you, texted you, messaged you, have set notifications. And it's so easy to then sit down, and then next thing you know, you're on TikTok, and the time has ticked and talked by, and you've watched. Anyway, that's just me. I'm the only one who struggles with that. Okay, it's so easy to just pick it up out of habit. And I'm not saying for creativity's sake, which is good, but we have to create space where we interact with God and we're not distracted. For me, that means when I think of a thought, because when you sit down to pray, you will think of things you have forgotten forever. Anyone? Sometimes it's good to just have a piece of paper and write it down, because you start thinking about the things you need to do later. Just write it down, be done with it. If not, that creeps in, and you really don't have a prayer time. You have a thinking of everything you have to do that day time. which is a very different thing. It's hard because we're all a little ADD. And if we're truthful, we like, some of us, the sounds and distractions around us, right? Like, some of our personalities like the lots of stuff going on and craziness, and some of us not so, but we still have to deal with it. Silence is difficult, but in it you'll better hear God's voice. Often we know it's true, but we have trouble doing it. I was reading a book this week, and Dallas Willard said, "The general human failing is to want what is right and important, but at the same time not to commit to the kind of life that will produce the action we know to be right and the condition we want to enjoy. We intend what is right, but we avoid the life that would make it reality." We want the benefit of prayer. We want the relationship, but it's often hard to actually do it because so many things war for us. I often think of it like two magnets. I'm fascinated by magnets, and I don't know, anyone else? No? Okay, just me. Anyway, with magnets, it's like if you have a piece of metal between the two. I used to always play with it and like kind of which one does it go to, and get it close and do you can make things hover, all kinds of cool stuff. But really, it's like there's God and the world, if I can speak in simplistic terms, and we're kind of being pulled to either side. And sometimes it takes physical force to go to the God side because so many things war and distract against your soul. And so we need to be people committed to working hard at our relationship. It's funny, even the being with God takes some doing on our part, right? How do you find silence and time for God? We often have to forego the good for the better or necessary. Sleep is good. I'm not an anti-sleep guy. Like sleep. But I've found, like this morning when my alarm went off, I didn't want to get up, but I did. Why? Because there were some necessary things that were better. And so sometimes we have to give up things. Work is good, but prayer is essential. If you wake up at 6, maybe you have to wake up at 5:30. If you wake up at noon, 11:30, I don't know. Or maybe some of you can pray at night too. I have to do everything important in the morning, or it just doesn't get done most days. Like I'm a morning workout person, not because I like to get up in the morning and work out. I just like to work out before I've thought about it. Same thing with prayer. Sometimes it's better just to be disciplined and do it early. And learn to pray and hear from God by carving out that time with Him. The Christian life is this invitation into a relationship with Jesus. Again, we talked about the Sermon on the Mount, good stuff, really, Matthew 5-7, good stuff to read about. What does it look like to live out Christianity? That's Jesus's teachings in a compact place. Like, read that. Live that. It's hard. But the truth is, I'll fail at it, but when you grow in your relationship with Christ, living that way starts to seem a little more normal. Making friends with our enemies, serving it's a little easier, I think it's a lot like, and again, I bring everything back to lifting weights because that's how I think. If I say, and I was trying to think of if I say go bench press 500, it was my original note, and I'm like, that's probably not realistic for most people. But in my world, everyone benches 500 pounds. You're like, what world do you live in? But, if I were to say, if you want to go bench press, let's say 225, apparently that's, like a big weight for most people, or 315, whatever your goal is. Some of you are like looking at me like, that's crazy. Some of you are like, I curl that. But anyone? No one's saying that, actually. Most of us, if I just said, go do it right now, you would fail, right? Like, let's be honest. And, it's like, you're like, I haven't done it in a long time. It's not going to. But if I said, train and prepare, allow your body to be transformed by going to the gym, apprentice under a power lifter, somebody who kind of has done it, eventually you might reach that goal. And really, the idea is you have to take on a new way of life to get to that goal. And prayer is this new way of life, this new way of living. If we take it on, Christians take on the way of Christ, we apprentice our lives to Him, and that's what changes and transforms us. because the Holy Spirit works with that. But often we get kind of pulled off track. And there's this rhythm between prayer alone and time alone and serving others. We really, both are necessary. We need to serve, but we need to spend time with God. And you really need both to find your place to serve. So ask yourselves this year, at a question. It's like, how can I cultivate a more prayerful life in 2025? Which is crazy to say 2025. It just seems like. So as the worship team comes back to play, I do have a challenge for you too. I printed out, there's a week of prayer. We're connected with the Assemblies of God, and we have a week of prayer every January, which took me years to figure that out. I just thought every church I was in had a week of prayer. I didn't know everyone did it. And so there's some sheets in the back, you can get on the way out, and just some things to pray for. So I challenge you, it's just a little prayer point for the next week. Pray every day. Just, hit a little thing. Pray for other people. Pray for the things on the sheet. And that prayer kind of creates a habit that once you start it, it's natural to keep it going. And so that's a challenge for you this week.